My name is Melissa Turner. I'm 29 years old, and I was standing in a hostel kitchen in Chiang Mai when my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize. I almost didn't answer. I'd been overseas for 4 months, teaching English, finally living the year abroad I'd put off for a decade, to help take care of everyone else. I picked up anyway, because something told me to. Is this Melissa Turner? This is fraud prevention at Halcyon Bank. We're seeing 3 new credit applications under your name in the last 6 weeks. Did you authorize these? I stood there with a mug of instant coffee going cold in my hand, and said the only true thing I had. No, I didn't apply for anything. The woman on the phone read me the addresses tied to the accounts. All 3 were my mother's house, the house my brother Derek was staying in while I was gone. The first card had a $4,000 balance already. The second had been used for a down payment on a motorcycle. The third was less than a week old. Ma'am, the woman said, I need to ask you something directly. Do you know who might have access to your social security number? I laughed, and it wasn't a real laugh. It was the sound you make right before you understand something you already knew. Yeah, I said. I think I do. Then my phone buzzed again. A second call, coming in right now, while I was still on the line with the bank. It was my mother. Before I tell you what happened next, tell me, what time is it for you right now? Where are you watching from? I'm curious how far this story will travel. I let my mother's call go to voicemail and finished with the fraud department first, because some instinct in me already knew that whatever my mother was about to say wouldn't be the truth, not the whole truth anyway. I want to back up though, because none of this happened in a vacuum. To understand why I wasn't more shocked than I was, you need to know the people involved. My brother Derek is 32, 3 years older than me, and he has spent his entire adult life being rescued by people who love him too much to let him fail. He's charming in that specific way that makes waitresses comp his coffee and makes landlords give him a second chance on rent. Underneath the charm is someone who has never once, in my memory, considered that another person's resources belong to that person. My mother, Carol, is 61, and she has an almost artistic talent for turning enabling into virtue. If you press her on why she keeps giving Derek money, she doesn't get defensive, she gets serene. She'll tell you that family helps family, that you don't turn your back on blood, that people who keep score were never really family to begin with. It sounds beautiful, until you realize the scorekeeping only ever runs in one direction. Let me give you specifics, because My Brother is Entitled isn't a story, it's a complaint. Here's the pattern. 2 years ago, in March, Derek borrowed my car for what he said would be a weekend to help a friend move. I got it back 19 days later, with a cracked bumper and a check engine light he never mentioned. When I brought it up at dinner, my mother told me I was being materialistic in front of the whole table. Last September, Derek was between jobs. He's always between jobs. And my mother took $800 out of an account she was supposedly holding for my late father's headstone fund to cover his rent. I only found out because the monument company called me directly asking why the deposit had bounced. In January of last year, Derek used my name as a reference on a job application, without asking me, and when the employer called, I found out mid-conversation that I was supposedly vouching for someone I hadn't spoken to in months. And this past spring, before I left for Thailand, Derek asked to hold on to my passport photocopy and old tax documents in case anything came up while I was gone, in case I needed something notarized. I said yes. I want you to remember that detail, because it matters later. There was one more, smaller than the rest, that I only understood the weight of afterward. The week before I flew out, Derek asked if he could use my laptop to print something real quick, while I packed. I said sure, distracted, half my mind already on boarding passes and adapters. I didn't think about it again until the fraud call, when I remembered that my laptop still had an old, unencrypted folder of scanned documents from when I'd refinanced my student loans 2 years earlier. I never checked whether that folder had been opened. I still don't know if it was relevant, and that not knowing is its own kind of unsettling. None of these were one-time slips. Each one built quietly on the last, and each time, My mother's response was the same. Don't make waves. Don't be the difficult one. Don't turn a small thing into a big thing. So no, when the fraud department read me those addresses, I wasn't shocked. I was just finally looking directly at something I had spent years learning to look past. I called my mother back 40 minutes later, once I'd had time to breathe. The texts had already started flooding in by then. Derek, whatever you heard, it's not what it looks like. My mother, please don't do anything rash. We can talk about this like a family. Derek, I was going to pay it back before you even noticed. My mother, you have no idea what it's been like here, trying to keep this family together, while you're off having your little adventure. My Aunt Diane, who I hadn't spoken to in 8 months, everything okay over there? Heard there's some kind of misunderstanding. Word had already traveled before I'd said a single word to anyone but the bank. I didn't respond to any of it that night. I called my best friend Priya instead, because I needed someone who wasn't inside the blast radius. Priya has known me since college, and she has this quality of being able to say the hardest sentence in the calmest voice, which is exactly what I needed. They opened cards in your name while you were literally on another continent, she said, once I'd laid it all out. Mel, listen to me. This isn't a family misunderstanding. This isn't your brother being irresponsible again. This is identity theft, and your mother knew about it, or she's about to lie to you about not knowing. She's going to say I'm overreacting. She's been saying that for 6 years, about 6 different things, Priya said. At some point, you have to ask yourself what you're actually protecting by staying quiet. Because it isn't the family, it's just Derek. I don't want to blow everything up over a motorcycle, I said. You're not blowing anything up. You're describing what already happened. There's a difference between causing damage and reporting it. What if I go back and it turns out to be smaller than it sounds right now? Then it'll be smaller, and you'll know that for a fact instead of hoping it, Priya said. But Mel, 3 accounts is not a rounding error. Somebody sat down 3 separate times and decided your name was available to them. Then she said the line I keep coming back to, the one I'd later have to say out loud to other people, more than once. This isn't help anymore, Mel. This is ownership. He didn't borrow your name. He's been living inside it. I flew back 9 days later. I told myself I was going to handle this reasonably, like an adult, sitting at the same kitchen table where I'd eaten cereal as a kid. I actually believed, walking in, that if I just laid it out calmly, my mother would see it the way I saw it. My mother had made a pot roast, like this was a homecoming, and not a reckoning. Derek wouldn't quite look at me. I just need to understand, I said, keeping my voice level. Why there are 3 credit accounts with my name and this address that I never opened. You're acting like he robbed a bank, my mother said, not looking up from the roast. He made a mistake. He's your brother. He committed fraud. Don't use that word in my house. It's the accurate word. Derek finally spoke. I was going to tell you. I swear I was going to tell you, before it got this big. How big did you think it was going to get, Derek? You bought a motorcycle. I was going to sell it and pay off the balance. You don't even understand the plan. There is no version of this where using my social security number without asking me is a plan. You're twisting it into something uglier than it is, Derek said. I'm describing exactly what it is. I had the documents. You gave those to me. I gave you a photocopy to notarize one thing. That's not the same as permission to open 3 credit lines. It's the same category of thing. Come on. It is not remotely the same category of thing, Derek. He pushed back from the table an inch, like the word landed somewhere physical. Don't say fraud like that, like I'm some kind of criminal. I'm not calling you anything. I'm describing 3 accounts with my name on them that I never authorized. My mother set down her fork with a click that felt louder than it should have. You have always made things harder than they need to be. Your brother is going through something. He lost his job again. He's been under so much stress. And instead of asking how you can help, you're sitting here talking about fraud like he's a stranger. He's not a stranger. That's the problem. A stranger couldn't have done this. He had my documents because I trusted him with them. So this is your fault too, is that what you're saying? Derek said. And there it was. The flip. Right on cue. That's not what I said. You left the country for months, and you're surprised things got complicated? You weren't here. I wasn't here because I finally did something for myself for once, and you used that as an opportunity. My mother's voice went soft in that way that used to work on me. I raised both of you to take care of each other. Do you know what it does to me? Hearing you talk about your own brother like he's a criminal. I am asking you, as your mother, to let this go quietly, for the family. He opened lines of credit in my name, Mom. There's no quiet version of that. Then what do you want, Melissa? You want to destroy him? You want to call the police on your own brother? Is that the kind of person you've become? I didn't get to finish the sentence, because my phone rang. Halcyon Bank's fraud department, again. And this time the woman on the line told me a detective from the local financial crimes unit wanted to speak with me directly, because the pattern on the accounts matched 2 other reported cases of family member identity theft that had been escalated that same month. The table went silent. My mother's face changed in a way I'd never seen before. This wasn't a family conversation anymore. It had a name, and a case number. I stepped outside to take the second call, and Detective Reyes introduced herself, said she handled financial crimes for the county, and asked if I'd be willing to come in and make a formal statement. She said the words, documented pattern and affidavit in the same sentence, and something in my chest loosened, because for the first time since Thailand, someone else was going to be looking at this too. It wasn't just my word against my mother's version of peace anymore. I didn't sleep that night. Instead, I sat at the small desk in my childhood bedroom and started collecting everything, methodically, the way Detective Reyes had asked me to. I screenshotted every text from Derek and my mother, time-stamped. I pulled the 3 account opening dates from the bank's fraud portal. I found an old email where Derek had asked to hold my documents, dated the week before I left the country, proof he'd had access before I was even gone. I wrote down the exact wording of the pot roast conversation while it was still fresh, because Priya told me juries and detectives both respond better to specifics than to feelings. Comment what you would have done, because this question haunted me while I sat there at 2 in the morning organizing screenshots of my own family turning against me in real time. Would you have stayed quiet to keep the peace, or would you have done exactly what I was doing? The meeting with Detective Reyes took place 4 days later, in a small beige office that smelled like burnt coffee. My mother came. Derek came, because his name was on the paperwork too, whether he wanted it there or not. Detective Reyes started plainly. I want to walk through the timeline of these 3 accounts, and I want to hear from each of you separately about what you knew and when. Derek went first. I only opened one of them. The others must have been some kind of mix-up. Detective Reyes glanced at her folder. Our records show all 3 applications came from the same IP address, associated with a device registered to you, sir. Okay, maybe I opened all 3, but I always intended to pay them back. Intent to repay doesn't change whether consent was given at the time of application, she said. Did your sister give you permission to use her social security number? It's not like I stole it. I had access to her documents already. Having access and having permission are 2 different things under the law, Detective Reyes said. Did she give you permission? Silence. My mother jumped in. He's under a lot of stress, Detective. Surely there's some leniency for family situations. Mrs. Turner, did you know these accounts existed before your daughter received the fraud alert call? My mother hesitated. I knew he was having financial trouble. That's not what I asked. I may have seen a piece of mail. Which account? I don't recall which one. Was it the motorcycle purchase? Another pause, longer this time. I think I might have seen something about that. Yes. You told me 2 minutes ago you only knew he was having financial trouble in general, I said. Now you remember a specific motorcycle. Melissa, this isn't a courtroom. It kind of is, Mom. Detective Reyes didn't raise her voice, but the room quieted around her anyway. Mrs. Turner, for the record, when did you first see mail related to any of these 3 accounts? Maybe 2 months ago. And the fraud alert call to your daughter happened 6 weeks ago. So you're saying you knew for at least 2 weeks before she found out? My mother's hands twisted in her lap. I didn't think of it as something to report. I thought it was between the two of them. It was never between the two of them, I said. I wasn't in the country. I wasn't part of any conversation. Derek tried to redirect. Look, I get that this looks bad on paper, but intent matters, right? I never meant to hurt her. Intent isn't part of what I'm assessing today, Detective Reyes said. Documentation is. I felt something crack open in me, quiet but total. She had known, not guessed, known, and said nothing, and let me find out from a stranger on a hostile kitchen floor on the other side of the world. I read from my notes when Detective Reyes asked me to walk through what I knew. I read the email where Derek asked to hold my documents. I read the timestamp of the fraud call. I read back the line from dinner, the one where my mother told me I was making things harder than they needed to be. Derek looked at the floor. My mother looked at her hands. The meeting ended without an arrest, without a dramatic ending. Detective Reyes said the case would go to the DA's Financial Crimes Division for review, that these things take weeks, sometimes months, that I'd likely need to give another statement. It wasn't the clean, satisfying ending you want after a moment like that. It was just the next step, but it was a real step, documented, with my name on the right side of the paperwork for the first time in this whole mess. Within 2 days, the story had traveled the way these things do in families, sideways and distorted. My Aunt Diane texted the family group chat that I was trying to ruin Derek's life over a misunderstanding. A cousin I barely spoke to messaged me privately saying I should think about what this does to Mom's health. My mother, I later learned, had told at least 3 relatives that I'd gone behind the family's back to the police, instead of handling it like an adult. I didn't argue with any of it in the group chat. Instead, I posted one thing, just once, in a smaller family thread, that included the cousins and aunts who'd actually reached out to ask what happened. I posted a screenshot of the fraud department's confirmation letter, the one listing all 3 accounts, my name, and the addresses. No commentary, just the document. For 11 minutes, nobody responded. Then my cousin Ray wrote, "Wait, he used her actual documents? That's not a misunderstanding, that's straight up theft." My Aunt Diane went quiet in the thread for the rest of the day and texted me privately that night, alone, to say she hadn't known the full extent of it and she was sorry for what she'd said. A second cousin, Priya's opposite in every way, someone who usually stayed neutral in family things, simply wrote, "I'm so sorry, Mel. That's not okay." The narrative Derek and my mother had been building for a week came apart in less time than it takes to microwave dinner. The formal consequences meeting happened almost 6 weeks later, once the DA's office had reviewed the case and Halcyon Bank's internal fraud investigators had finished their own report. We sat in a conference room this time, not a kitchen, not a beige detective's office. There was a prosecutor's representative, a bank compliance officer, Detective Reyes, a lawyer Derek had finally hired, and a mediator brought in, because my mother's attorney had requested one last attempt at a civil resolution before anything went further. The bank's compliance officer spoke first, laying out the paper trail without emotion. 3 accounts, my documents, dates that lined up precisely with the timeline in the email Derek sent, asking to hold my paperwork. A motorcycle purchase traced directly to the second card. Derek's lawyer tried to frame it as a family financial arrangement gone wrong. My client believed, in good faith, that this was an informal loan structure his family would understand. An informal loan structure requires the other party to know a loan exists, the compliance officer said. Derek tried again. "I told Mom about it. I thought that counted." "Telling your mother is not the same as informing the person whose credit was used," Detective Reyes said. My mother's lawyer tried a different angle. Mrs. Turner was under the impression this was a temporary measure that would be resolved before Melissa returned. Mrs. Turner confirmed under questioning 6 weeks ago that she was aware of at least one account before the fraud alert was issued, Detective Reyes said, reading directly from her notes. That awareness was never disclosed to the account holder. My mother looked at me then, and for the first time in this entire process, She didn't sound serene. I didn't think it would go this far. You didn't think I'd find out, I said. That's different. Derek's lawyer tried once more, softer this time, aiming at sympathy instead of technicality. My client is prepared to make full restitution. Surely that counts for something. Restitution is a separate conversation from consent, the compliance officer said. Right now, we're establishing what happened, not what he's willing to pay back. I'm sitting right here, Derek said. Can we talk about me like I'm a person and not a case file? You made yourself a case file, I said. I didn't do that. You did that when you used my social security number without telling me. I said I was going to pay it back. You keep saying that, like it changes what happened at the start. It doesn't. It just means you had a plan, for after you'd already taken something that wasn't yours to take. The room went quiet in the particular way rooms go quiet when someone has said the one sentence nobody can argue with. The mediator asked if I wanted to make a statement before terms were discussed. I hadn't planned what I'd say, but it came out clean, because I'd been carrying it a long time. I spent years being the one who didn't complain, who didn't keep score, who let things go so the family could stay comfortable. What I've learned these last 6 weeks is that comfort was never mutual. It only ever went one way. I'm not here to destroy anyone. I'm here because I want my name to belong to me again. Nobody had a response to that. The room just sat in it for a second, and then the paperwork started. The terms took another hour to hash out. Derek would be responsible for full restitution across all 3 accounts, structured as a payment plan monitored by the bank's fraud resolution team, with the criminal referral held in abeyance, contingent on compliance, meaning one missed payment would reopen the criminal case immediately. My mother signed a separate acknowledgement of what she'd known and when, which her own attorney told her was necessary to keep any civil liability off her directly. Derek signed everywhere his lawyer told him to sign, and for the first time since Thailand, I watched him look, if only for a moment, like a person who understood the size of what he'd done, rather than the size of the inconvenience it caused him. The weeks after moved in waves, so I'll give them to you the way they came. Fast. Because that's how they felt. Derek's landlord found out through a background recheck, and didn't renew his lease. He moved into a studio apartment across town, the first place he'd rented entirely on his own credit, under his own name, in years. My mother stopped hosting the big Sunday dinners for a while, partly out of embarrassment, partly because half the family had quietly pulled back from her after the group chat screenshot made the rounds. Aunt Diane, who'd called me the difficult one, started calling me to check in instead, an irony that took me weeks to stop noticing. Derek, for the first time in his adult life, had to build his own credit back from close to nothing, the exact unglamorous work that I had spent years quietly doing for both of us without him ever once asking how. He took a second job, evenings at a hardware store, just to keep the payment plan current, and I heard through my cousin Ray that he'd started keeping his own paperwork now, actual folders, actual copies, the irony of which nobody in the family said out loud, but everyone clearly noticed. 4 months after the settlement, Derek asked to meet me for coffee. He'd made 3 payments on time. He didn't ask me for anything when we sat down, which was its own kind of first. He said, plainly, I don't expect you to trust me again right away. I know I don't get to set the timeline on that. It wasn't a full apology with all the right words, but it was more honesty than I'd heard from him in a decade, so I let it be enough for that day. My mother took longer. She called one afternoon, months later, and asked if I could help out with a bill. Nothing about Derek, just a favor, the old familiar shape of the ask. I felt the pull to just say yes, the way I always had. Instead I said, I can talk through options with you, but I'm not going to be the one who covers it. She was quiet for a second, and then said okay, and the conversation moved on to something else. It was such a small moment. It didn't feel small. If you've watched this far, there's a decent chance you already know which person you are in your own version of this story. Maybe you're the dependable one, the one who gets asked because you're the one who always says yes. Maybe you're the quiet one, The one who's been swallowing small betrayals for years and calling it keeping the peace. Maybe you're standing exactly where I was standing in that hostile kitchen, holding a phone with news that's about to rearrange everything you thought you understood about your own family. Here is what I know now that I didn't know before. Boundaries are not betrayal. Documentation is not cruelty. A family that requires your silence to function was never asking for your loyalty. It was asking for your silence. You are allowed to love people and still hold them accountable. You are allowed to be the one who finally says the true thing out loud, even if it's the first time anyone has said it in that kitchen in 20 years. What would you have done if the call had come for you first? Tell me in the comments, because I still think about that hostile kitchen more than I think about almost anything else. This video is completely fictional and created only for entertainment, educational, and reflective purposes.